If you've been keeping up with the most recent chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen, you've probably been paying special attention to a character that we've all been waiting over 100 chapters for some more insight and exposure, Ryomen Sukuna. Since the beginning of the story, Sukuna's plan and true intentions have been shrouded nearly completely in mystery, but with these recent chapters, we've been given a bit more insight onto what his true plan has been for the entire series. This video isn't necessarily a power scaling video for Sukuna, but a clear, concise recap on nearly everything Sukuna has done from chapter 212 and onwards, and I hope to clear up some misconception about what he says translation-wise or any other misinterpretations of events that unfold on screen. And overall, I want to recap on everything we learned about recently regarding Jujutsu Kaisen's true evil. If you enjoy Jujutsu Kaisen content, please leave a like and subscribe, and comment on some video ideas you want to see be done down below. Since the beginning of the story, Sukuna has taken an unknown interest in Megami ever since their second encounter in chapter 9. Once Megami begins to go all out against Sukuna, he begins the ritual to summon his ace in his arsenal, Maharaga. As Megami's cursed energy begins to build up, Sukuna's eyes suddenly widen, and he begins getting excited. But as we all know, this fight is soon cut short. Yuji switched places back with Sukuna, leading to Yuji's death and the end of the encounter. Later inside Sukuna's innate domain, Sukuna had made a binding vow with Yuji. Sukuna will use reverse curse technique to heal Yuji's heart, but in return, he wants to be allowed to switch places with Yuji at any time for 1 minute just by saying the word Enchain. Sukuna wants to make a one-time agreement with Yuji, and the only condition is that Sukuna can't hurt anyone. For nearly 205 chapters, we've heard absolutely nothing about this binding vow or what Sukuna's plan was, except that it had something to do with Megami. Throughout the entire story, Sukuna has made it clear that he wants to use Megami, even going as far as saving his life during the Shibuya incident. Sukuna defeated Maharaga and even healed Megami using reverse curse technique. Even Yuji thought it would be a bad idea for him and Megami to separate from Yuta, because if Sukuna comes back, Yuta is their only hope according to Yuji for ending the incarnation. And finally in chapter 212, we begin to see Sukuna's plan come full circle. Megami's main motivation for wanting to join the Culling Games this entire time has been to save his sister Tsumiki. When Kenjaku created the Culling Games, he brought in mainly two different types of participants. The first were people whose brains have been adjusted to become vessels similar to Yuji Itadori. However, unlike Yuji, these people can't suppress the people that they have now become vessels for like Yuji can with Sukuna. Kenjaku adjusted their brains, giving them full control of their new bodies, making it as close to a resurrection as you can get. The second type of players are people who have curse techniques but whose brains don't have the capacity to perform Jujutsu. Similar to what Mahito had done to Junpei, Kenjaku had adjusted their brains to allow them to become modern-day sorcerers. Megami had assumed this entire time that his sister was the second option, someone who had become a player in the Culling Games without becoming a vessel for a past sorcerer, but Megami could not have been more wrong. After manipulating Megami and Yuji to give her 100 points, it's revealed that Megami's sister this entire time has been a past sorcerer by the name of Yorozu from 1,000 years ago. Yorozu used her points given to her by Megami to add a rule to the Culling Games, allowing players to enter in between existing barriers, allowing in and out access to all the colonies of the Culling Games. Megami begins sweating in a state of shock. He asked who he thought was his sister, who she actually is. During the state of confusion, Yorozu flies away after she said that she chooses her first opponent in 1,000 years to be Sukuna. Sukuna uses this opportunity to use the binding vow he made with Yuji, and he says Enchain. Sukuna quickly takes down the angel and sets his sights on Megami. Sukuna says that here on out, it's a gamble. It's later explained by the angel what exactly Sukuna's doing. She says that many players from the past only joined the Culling Games because they didn't know how to become cursed objects after death. While that's still true, Sukuna is different. She says that maybe after experiencing death once, he learned how to divide his soul as a cursed object. After ripping off one of Yuji's fingers, Sukuna says that in the binding vow, not hurting anyone didn't actually include Yuji. Megami begins to start the ritual to summon Maharaga like he did last time, but Sukuna quickly grabs Megami's arm, making him unable to summon Maharaga. Sukuna grabs Megami's face and force feeds him his own finger. At that moment, Yuji Itadori was no longer the vessel for the special grade cursed spirit Sukuna, and instead, Sukuna had transferred vessels to Megami Fushiguro. Sukuna says that Megami had the curse technique potential and the tolerance to withstand being a vessel. However, Sukuna says it would have been bad if Megami became a cage for Sukuna like Yuji instead of a proper vessel. Sukuna could have always made Megami eat a finger, but to fully gain control of Megami's body, he would need to regain his strength inside Yuji's body and wait for the right moment for Megami's soul to break. The name of the arc for chapter 213 is Fearsome Moon Part 5, and it's actually the continuation of the arc labeled in chapter 9, Fearsome Moon Part 4, which is actually the last time that Megami had fought Sukuna. Sukuna now stands fully incarnated inside Megami's body, and he dashes at Yuji and sends him flying through a neighboring building. Maki and Takaba both realize that something has just gone wrong and begin making their way back. Sukuna uses Megami's 10 Shadows curse technique to summon Nue, except it's a much bigger Nue than anything that we've ever seen. As Sukuna uses Nue to create a giant giant lightning strike. Just in time, the angel was able to regain consciousness because her and Hana live symbiotically. But Hana, her vessel, is hesitant to hurt Megami. The angel convinces Hana that they need to take the opportunity to take down Sukuna before he gains a stronger hold on Megami. She activates her curse technique Jacob's Ladder and nearly obliterates Sukuna. But then suddenly the markings on Megami's body begin to disappear, and Sukuna tricks Hana into thinking that she's eradicated Sukuna. But Sukuna reveals his true intentions by biting off Hana's wing and throwing her off the building, revealing that he was only playing an act. Yuji, who had just waken up to see Hana's body dropping down a building, begins facing off against Sukuna. Yuji jumps and dashes towards Sukuna before the two crash down into a parking garage. Yuji throws a massive block of cement at Sukuna, and Sukuna questions what is this strength. Yuji literally rips out a street sign from the ground and tries to strike Sukuna, but of course Sukuna evades and kicks Yuji in the face. After creating some distance, Sukuna begins to use his curse technique to slice Yuji's shoulder. Yuji begins to walk closer to Sukuna bit by bit while taking the force of Sukuna's curse technique, and he manages to get closer and closer. Sukuna questions why Yuji is so tough, but he says no, that's not right, and Yuji actually lands a punch on Sukuna, and Sukuna says that in this form, his cursed energy output is low. Sukuna says that his cursed energy output is fluctuating, and at its lowest, it's under 10%, but physical movement seems to be fine. What I had just read was the Viz translation for JJK chapter 215. A translator on Twitter named Lightning, whose Twitter will be linked in the description, translated this statement. Lightning says, the second line is misleading. Its nuance is that the ability to control Megami's body isn't as bad as the cursed energy drop when he uses his curse technique. Here's a more accurate translation. There are some irregularities, but Sukuna's cursed energy output is falling below 10%, but it doesn't go as far as hindering Sukuna's movements in the vessel. This mistranslation caused a huge misconception. People thought that every aspect of Sukuna's cursed energy output was limited, when in actuality, it was only limited when using his curse technique on Megami's allies. Suddenly, Maki arrives to help Yuji and asks for a brief rundown. Sukuna notices that Maki hasn't taken any damage from Nue and concludes that she isn't easy to take down. Yuji tells Maki that this guy won't die even if you go all out, but this is yet again another mistranslation. According to Lightning, Sukuna uses a more sophisticated wording for his wrong assumption about Maki. He says he doesn't see any damage from Nue, so she wasn't a woman who could be crudely called out. Lightning says that Yuji's line is also botched, and here is the literal one. Yuji says that this guy won't die even if you kill him. The line is meant to be hazy in interpretation, but for some reason Viz decided to add an extra layer of the meaning, which is weird because Maki recites Yuji's literal exact words next up. Maki begins to scrap with Sukuna, and Sukuna blocks her kick after landing a quick punch on Yuji. Maki blocks Sukuna's next attack, but she blocks it in a way where she could hold Sukuna's hand in place for a counter strike and pushes Sukuna into a barricade. This is followed up by Yuji grabbing that same barricade to wrap Sukuna to set him up for Maki's kick, and Sukuna is then sent flying. Maki and Yuji then reconvene, but as you probably guessed, Viz mistranslated yet another page. According to the GOAT Lightning, Maki recites Yuji's hazy but short summary, and Maki says capture, not stop. And she also mentions reverse curse technique, which Viz Media seems to have omitted for some strange reason. This is the entire proper translation for this page. But let's get back to it. Yuji and Maki begin to dash at Sukuna, and as Yuji jumps into the air, Maki grabs Yuji's leg and swings him into Sukuna, but of course Sukuna blocks. Sukuna ducks down and uses Cleave Spiderweb to break apart the ground and force Yuji and Maki off their footing. Sukuna says that his body resists and drops the cursed energy output when Sukuna attempts to hurt his allies. And yet again, somehow Viz mistranslated this page. Lightning says the cursed energy output towards his cursed technique, not his cursed energy output in general. Lightning then gives a more precise translation, saying probably when Sukuna tries to hurt Megami's comrades, the body strongly resists Sukuna and drops his cursed technique's cursed energy output. From this statement, we can gather that Sukuna's talking about two things. One, when he attacks, and two, it specifically only affects his curse technique. We saw this earlier at the start of the chapter, indicating that the cursed energy output only drops only when in regards to his cursed technique, not necessarily his cursed energy output in terms of reinforcement or general usage. Once Sukuna pushes Yuji and Maki off their footing, he punches Maki in the face before both of them begin to clash, bouncing from rock to rock before both of them landing back in the street. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, Yurame, Sukuna's minion, uses her curse technique and activates Frost Calm at maximum output, and freezes both Maki and Yuji. Yurame apologized to Sukuna, but says that Yurame didn't freeze Yuji in too deeply, but Sukuna assures Yurame that it's alright, and that he's not interested in Yuji anymore. He tells Yurame to prepare the bath, but Yurame says it's already ready. As Yuji breaks out the ice, Sukuna and Yurame both note how pathetic Yuji is, and they just sit there and laugh in his face as they fly away on Nue to the bath. The bath is a ritual for turning a vessel vessel that is as cherished as a family treasure to a cursed tool, protecting it from external threats. It means in 10 months and 10 days of soaking the vessel in a solution, the point is to be near evil and continue to submerge Megami's soul. When Sukuna wakes up from the bath, he asked Kogane for the location of Yorozu and began making his way there. Killing Yorozu will sink Megami's soul, allowing Sukuna to fully remove the limiters on his curse technique that we mentioned earlier. When Sukuna enters Sendai Colony, both Uro and Ryu feel his immense presence coming closer. Ryu even says that this presence is way too sweet. When encountering Ryu, Sukuna asks if he's gonna step aside or not, but Ryu lifts his hand, but he's already cut by Sukuna and dashes back. Sukuna says that he wanted to slice Ryu into 3 pieces, but he underestimated him, and next time he won't make the same mistake. Ryu begins charging up a granite blast, but it's already too late for Ryu. Later, we see Sukuna's finally ready to face off against Yorozu. Back in the Heian era at some point 1,000 years ago, we see Yorozu's first encounter with Sukuna. When Yorozu first laid eyes on the King of Curses, it was love at first sight. Yorozu dashes at Sukuna, but then after a few moments, she dashes back, realizing that she's been struck by Urame's curse technique. But then it's revealed that Sukuna actually cut Yorozu using his curse technique, but it only strengthened the love Yorozu had for Sukuna. Love that's strong enough to last over 1,000 years. Yorozu is confused and asks Sukuna why he doesn't change his face and that he has that advantage over other vessels. But Sukuna asked her the same question, and she says that she can, but this will work out better for her later on. Sukuna then asked her if she really thinks that she's still going to be around later on, before Yorozu attacks Sukuna, but he successfully evades. Yorozu begins blocking a barrage of attacks, but Sukuna leads up with a kick, but Yorozu ends up blocking that too. Yorozu says that back when she first revealed herself to Megami, the angel was there but didn't notice Sukuna, and says that she only knew it was Sukuna out of love. Yorozu wants to be the one to kill Sukuna, and Yorozu also wants Sukuna to be the one to kill her. Yorozu asks Sukuna that if she's alive after this, what will he give her? Sukuna says everything. Yorozu asks Sukuna if that includes marriage, and Sukuna says it's whatever you want. At that moment, Sukuna had just made a binding vow with Yorozu, and now she's even more entertained to fight. Sukuna summons divine dogs, and by not giving them a stable form, Sukuna has expanded the effective range and prevented complete destruction. The drawback is that the Shikigami cannot operate independently, therefore compromising its offensive strategy, but Sukuna can make up for that with his immense cursed energy output. Sukuna and Yorozu then begin to brawl, but Yorozu says stop and asks Sukuna if that's Sukuna's vessel's curse technique, and Sukuna confirms it was. Yorozu wonders if Sukuna is going to end up using Malevolent Shrine, but Sukuna says he won't be using that. Sukuna thinks to himself to drown Megami Fushiguro's soul, he must destroy his sister, but by using Megami's own curse technique, he can stain Megami's soul with the sin of having hurt his older sister, and overall weaken his resolve. Yorozu literally begins throwing a fit and starts crying, and she says to Sukuna that she doesn't want him to use any other curse technique aside from his own to hurt his future wife. Yorozu's curse technique is creation like Mai Zenin. Depending on her training, she can recreate nearly anything that she can recognize, except for special grade curse tools. With her experience as a veteran sorcerer, Yorozu developed liquid metal with changeable volume yet stable physical properties, due to autonomous cursed energy, to create an armor specialized for appropriating numerous biofunctions. After Yorozu creates her armor, Sukuna says that it's time for a test drive and summons Maharaga's wheel on top of his head. Yorozu dashes at Sukuna and quickly punches the King of Curses. She then flies around the tumbling Sukuna to quickly land a secondary strike, but Sukuna quickly regains his footing and counters using the Ten Shadows curse technique. But Yorozu flies around the other side and kicks Sukuna in the face, sending Sukuna flying into a building. Sukuna then summons another Shikigami, Round Deer. This Shikigami has the ability to use reverse curse technique, so it neutralized Yorozu's cursed energy flowing through liquid metal. Sukuna then summons Piercing Ox, the Shikigami with the ability to build up more power to its strikes when crossing longer distances to strike opponents. However, it can only move in a straight line. Sukuna then summons a bunch of rabbit Shikigami to cover Yorozu and hide his own position, while really Sukuna is up in the air, dropping down a max elephant on Yorozu to destroy her armor. A seemingly defeated Yorozu begins using her trump cards. She creates a perfect sphere. A true sphere is said to be impossible to create. Because it has no contact area, it can generate infinite pressure, destroying anything in its path. And on top of that, she opens up her domain expansion, but Yorozu just stands confused. Sukuna begins to just stand there, turning the wheel on top of his head. She questions why Sukuna won't open up his own domain expansion. Sukuna has seen a little bit of what the perfect sphere can do, and on top of that, this domain has a guaranteed hit, meaning if Yorozu activates her technique, Sukuna would get completely obliterated. Sukuna then opens up a shadow and drops down the wheel that he carried on top of his head, mysteriously for the entire fight, and begins summoning Maharaga. The Shikigami then breaks down Yorozu's entire domain expansion and destroys the perfect sphere in one blow, and Yorozu's next. Sukuna says that an inefficient curse technique like hers always ends up being the same. Whatever she constructs, the substance appropriates the liquid metal or the insect armor that she's been using. But by Sukuna using Maharaga's wheel, Maharaga had already adapted by the time he was summoned. In her last moments before death, she uses her curse technique to create something for Sukuna. What that was at the time of this recording has still not been revealed, and with the death of Megami's sister, Sukuna had sunk Megami's soul even deeper into the abyss. The next time Sukuna appears is during the unsealing of Satoru Gojo. After Satoru Gojo is finally released from the prison realm, Sukuna and Gojo clash and fly into the air. Sukuna asks Satoru if he remembers the promise that he made in chapter 3, that he would be the one to kill Gojo, and he even reaffirms that promise. But Gojo just laughs in his face and says that Sukuna's the same guy who ran from Yuji with his tail between his legs. Urame gets visually upset at Gojo, but immediately gets sent flying from one punch. But before Sukuna and Gojo began to fight, they're interrupted by Kenjaku. Kenjaku says that Sukuna still has to fulfill some sort of agreement before he fights Satoru Gojo. Sukuna remembers something similar that Yorozu said during their fight, and he says he's fine waiting to fight Satoru Gojo. Gojo asks Kenjaku or Sukuna for today's date, and they both agree on December 24th. But until then, we're just gonna have to wait and see. But as of right now, that's a recap on everything Sukuna has done in the past few recent chapters. This isn't my first time making a recap video, but if you enjoyed or not, regardless, leave your thoughts below. But if you have any ideas for any other recaps or versus battles or even explained videos, leave your thoughts below. If you enjoy Jujutsu Kaisen content, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and comment on some video ideas you want to see be done down below.